Temperature fluctuations in different environments. Environmental temperatures fluctuate both daily and seasonally. Different environments such as freshwater, marine and terrestrial environments, are subjected to varied responses to fluctuating temperature. Temperature fluctuations are comparatively less in the aquatic environment than in the terrestrial environment. The increase in depth of aquatic medium often increases the temperature fluctuations. There exists a distinct difference in the response of living organisms of the freshwater and sea to temperature fluctuations because of the presence of dissolved salts in seawater. The minimum temperature in the sea is 3 degrees Celsius, while in freshwater pond it never goes below 0 degrees Celsius. The maximum temperature of ocean generally goes up to 36 degrees Celsius, but in shallow pools of freshwater and tide of pools littoral zone, temperature may go higher. In deeper bodies of water, heating and cooling are restricted to the surface strata. But the deeper layers of heat is a result of what is usually termed vertical ice cover circulation, wherein, due to circulatory movement of water, surface waters are brought to the deeper regions. And vice versa. Studies on the vertical changes of temperature have led to the hypothetical classification of the freshwater media into 3 strata. The superficial layer of freshwater is constantly stirred by wind and is METRES called epilimnion. Itis the layer of warmer water and its 2OL, 4 degrees temperature may rise up to 22 degrees Celsius during summers. The stagnant water of the bottom constitutes the hypolimnion. The hypolimnion has temperature of 5 degrees Celsius to 9 degrees Celsius. In Povis. Between epilimnion and hypolimnion occurs an R trademark epilimnion 210. Intermediate zone called thermocline or metalimnion. Which has rapid vertical temperature changes, figure 4.2 registered. Thermocline G degree B. During winter, the temperature of epilimnion of an equals Habulimnion freshwater lake becomes 0 degrees Celsius and the lake becomes ice equals P 8 degrees covered. The process of differentiation of freshwater habitat into these 3 strata is called thermal 5 degree stratification. In the terrestrial environment, the seasonal and figure 4.2 thermal stratification of 80 daily fluctuations in temperature are varied and marked. Lake of the temperate region, the lowest temperature recorded for any landmass is during winter, B during 70 degrees Celsius, Siberian 1947. Higher temperatures may likewise summer go often 85 degrees Celsius as in certain deserts at noon. However, the water in hot springs and geysers may approach 100 degrees Celsius, and even higher temperatures occur occasionally in the very special situation presented by volcanic areas. In Rajasthan, the highest temperature exceeds 50 degrees Celsius. On land, diurnal variations of temperature are quite staggering. The fluctuation between day and night temperatures may be 17 degrees Celsius in ordinary land masses or 40 degrees Celsius in deserts. The Thar Desert of South Rajasthan, India, shows a diurnal range of 20-30 degrees Celsius for all seasons. Difference in latitudes often cause variation in the annual temperature cycles with visible effects on the organisms. Further, with the increased altitude for every 150 meters, the decrease in temperature of 1 degree Celsius takes place. Range of temperature tolerance. Life in this universe exists within a range of 200 to 100 degrees Celsius. Though normal life persists within narrow temperature limits of about 10 to plus 50 degrees Celsius. Individual species survive in a smaller range and are active within even narrower limits. Many nematodes, rotifers and tardigrades have shown to withstand cooling to 272 degrees Celsius without ill effects. Larvae of chironomids and certain other diptera have been found to thrive at temperatures near 55 degrees Celsius. Praying mantis is reported to live in bare grounds at a temperature of 62 degrees Celsius in deserts. Some algae and bacteria are reported to live in hot springs at 88 degrees Celsius. Non-photosynthetic bacteria inhabiting hot springs can actively grow at temperatures greater than 90 degrees Celsius, Bodenbrock, 1969. On the other hand, some Arctic algae can complete their life cycles in places where the temperatures barely rise above 0 degrees Celsius. Further, the eggs of the acanthocephalin Macrocanthoranchus hirudinaceus have been known to withstand temperatures from 10 to 45 degrees Celsius for about 140 days, and desiccation at temperatures up to 39 degrees Celsius for a period of 265 days. The organisms, microbes, plants and animals which can tolerate very large fluctuations in temperature are called eurothermal organisms. For example, cyclops, toad, wall lizard, grass snake, man, etc., are the eurothermal animals. The organisms which can tolerate only a small variation in temperature are termed stenothermal organisms. The common stenothermal animals are fishes, snails, coral reefs, etc. In organisms, all metabolic processes necessary for life start at a certain minimum temperature and increase with rise in temperature until they reach the maximum level at a temperature called optimum temperature. Further rise in temperature beyond optimum brings about decrease in metabolic rate, until it ceases at a temperature called maximum temperature. Thus, the favorable temperature range for any particular species is determined by the prevailing temperature at which normal physiological activities of the animals take place, as in the distribution of the rotifer Caratella procura, Nair, 1970. This rotifer species is known to appear in the ponds of Pilani, Rajasthan, India, when the temperature is below 24 degrees Celsius and to disappear when it rises above 24 degrees Celsius, the frequency of distribution reaching a peak during months of October to March, with the fall in temperature. Poikilotherms and homeotherms. An animal's response to wide ranges in temperature is influenced by its physiology. All invertebrates, lower chordates, hemicrodates, urochordates and cephalochordates, cyclostomes, fishes, amphibians and reptiles have no internal mechanism for temperature regulation, and their body temperatures vary with the surrounding environmental temperatures. Such animals are called cold-blooded, ectothermic or poikilothermic organisms. The temperature range that a poikilothermic animal tolerates can be correlated closely with the environmental temperatures normally encountered in nature. Tropical animals cannot withstand low temperatures. Polar animals cannot withstand high temperature. Temperate zone animals survive a wide temperature range. Many poikilothermic animals show a rather precise discrimination of temperature. If the temperature decreases or increases appreciably, these animals may tolerate and adjust to change, may avoid the change by seeking a less exposed environment, or may become inactive. Some animals respond by becoming dormant during periods of extreme temperatures. Such dormancy is called estivation at high temperatures and hibernation at low temperatures. For example, most poikilotherms become inactive when the temperature of their surroundings goes below 8 degrees Celsius or rises to 42 degrees Celsius. The dormouse hibernates in winter when food is scarce. A few exceptional poikilotherms, especially insects, certain amphibians and reptiles, exercise a degree of thermoregulation by either physiological or behavioral mechanisms. For example, hawk moths can raise the temperature of their flight muscle to 32 degrees minus 30. For example, hawk moths can raise the temperature of their flight muscle to 32 degrees minus 36 degrees Celsius by vibrating the wings before takeoff, and gregarious butterfly larvae may raise their temperature 1%, 2 degrees Celsius when clustered together. Locust and grasshoppers may increase their temperature 10 degrees Celsius by basking sideways in the sun. Ants move their larvae to warm or cool places within the nest, and bees maintain temperatures within their hives between 13 degrees and 25 degrees Celsius by fanning with their wings to evaporate water droplets when it is too hot, or releasing body heat through increased metabolic activity when too cold. When temperature drops, lizards bask in the sun to achieve the desired body temperature. Once this thermal level is attained, they will divide their time between sun and shade to maintain it. Poikilotherms such as desert dwellers that live in environments where the temperature is apt to be very high are often nocturnal and, thus, avoid the highest temperatures of the day. Some poikilotherms, both vertebrates and invertebrates, lower their body temperatures slightly by evaporative cooling. In frogs and reptiles, evaporative cooling can occur through the skin or via the respiratory tract by panting. Warburg, 1967. Among the invertebrates, evaporative cooling has been reported in tropical intertidal zone animals. Lewis, 1963. In contrast to poikilotherms, birds and mammals can, within limits, maintain constant body temperatures, regardless of temperature variations of air and water. Such animals are termed warm-blooded, homeothermic or endothermic animals. The life processes are adjusted to function at the animal's normal temperature, averaging a little less than Pi1, and blubber 38 degrees Celsius in mammals and 3 to 4 degrees higher in birds. If its temperature Bi equals control fails, the animal dies. The homeothermic animals are I. Ji able to maintain the constancy of body temperature by a combination of several factors. 1. A thermoregulating center in the brain, hypothalamus. 2. Insulation. 3. A peripheral vascular response to ambient temperature. And 4. Metabolic compensation. Among these factors, insulation is highly important, particularly in enabling large Arctic animals to withstand very low temperature. If the temperature is lowered, the oxygen consumption rate of tropical mammals increases, whereas that of Arctic mammals remains basal. This response pattern is due to differences in insulation. Some Arctic animals are fur-insulated, whereas others are insulated with a layer of blubber. Many small animals, however, are not well insulated and must seek heat retention by other means, often by huddling together. Insulation by fur and blubber in polar bear. Homeothermic animals living in very hot environments cannot tolerate greatly elevated body temperatures, and they utilize methods that facilitate heat transfer to the environment, including an increased peripheral blood flow and surface cooling by sweating or panting. Birds may accomplish this by rearranging their plumage so that more skin is exposed. There is, however, no reduction in metabolic rate. Animals subjected to high temperature may exhibit diurnal patterns of behavior. That is, they may reduce locomotor activity during the heat of the day or may move into the shade to avoid direct sunlight. Some animals such as monotremes and marsupials have a limited power of temperature regulation. They are called heterothermic animals, e.g., the pygmy mouse and the little pocket mouse, which respond to temperature extremes by estivating or hibernating, and others such as the hummingbird, which experience a nocturnal drop in temperature. Plants too can be divided into the following three categories on the basis of their heat-tolerating capacity: megatherms, microtherms and mesotherms. Megatherm plants occur in warm habitat, e.g. desert vegetation. Microtherm plants occur in cold habitat, e.g. plants of high altitudes. Mesotherm plants are the plants of the habitat which is neither very hot nor very cold, e.g. aquatic plants. Hecastotherms include alpine vegetation which tolerate very low temperatures. Factors are variables affecting organismal response to temperature. The response of an organism to temperature is affected by a number of factors such as thermal history, genetic differences, diet, size, stage in life cycle, sex, molting, parasitism, hormones, etc. 1. Generally, animals found in warmer environments can withstand higher temperatures than animals from colder situations. It is also generally true that animals from colder environments tolerate lower temperatures better than those from the warmer climates. These differences between warm climate and cold climate populations may reflect basic genetic differences or may be phenotypic expressions resulting from different thermal histories. 2. The thermal resistance of a species may be closely identified with the genetic composition of the parent stock, as illustrated by hybrid development in two anaran species, Bufo valiceps and B. lupkini, Ballinger and McKinney, 1966. The lower lethal temperature for development of B. valiceps is 18 degrees Celsius, for B. lupkini, 22 degrees Celsius. In their hybrid, the lower lethal limit is found to be in between that of the two parents at 19.5 degrees Celsius. 3. In some animals, a relationship between the total intake of food and resistance to thermal stress has been demonstrated. Some species are more sensitive to elevated temperatures when they are starved for even short periods of time. Goldfish showed increased resistance to high temperature when placed on a high-fat diet, Hoare and Cottle, 1952. 4. The size of animal body is found to have some correlation with thermal lethal limits of animals. In some species, the smaller animals are more resistant to higher temperatures than the larger ones. In some species the reverse is noted, and in other species the smaller animals are more resistant to higher temperatures than the larger ones. In some species the reverse is noted, and in other species size is not an apparent variable. Further, some smaller animals die faster at low temperatures than do larger animals of the same species, but at higher temperatures body size is not a factor. 5. Many species of animals have exceedingly complex life cycles during which the larval stages are not only morphologically dissimilar from the adult but also occupy different ecological niches. In the wharf crab, Cesarma cinereum, thermal requirements of the planktonic zoil stages are different from those of adults because these larvae are limited to a smaller temperature range than are the adults. 6. The female sex is found to be more tolerant than males to the temperature fluctuations. 7. Among certain invertebrates, such as, in some crabs, molting adversely affected heat resistance, but had no effect on other species. 8. Mud-flat snails, Necarius obsoleta, which are heavily infected with trematode larvae, i.e., parasites cannot withstand high temperatures like the non-parasitized snails. 9. Hormones have been shown to influence cold and warm resistance as well as acclimatization, viz. temperature adaptation to temperature, especially in mammals and a few other invertebrates. Effect of temperature on plants and animals. Temperature has been found to affect the living organisms in various ways. Some of well-studied effects of temperature on living organisms are the following. 1. Temperature and cell. The minimum and maximum temperatures have lethal effects on the cells and their components. If too cold, cell proteins may be destroyed as ice forms, or as water is lost and electrolytes become concentrated in the cells. Heat coagulates proteins, Lewis and Taylor, 1967. 2. Temperature and metabolism. Most of metabolic activities of microbes, plants and animals are regulated by varied kinds of enzymes, and enzymes in turn are influenced by temperature. Consequently, increase in temperature, up to a certain limit, brings about increased enzymatic activity, resulting in an increased rate of metabolism. For instance, the activity of liver arginase enzyme upon arginine amino acid is found to increase gradually, with the simultaneous increase in the temperature from 17 degrees Celsius to 48 degrees Celsius. But an increase in temperature beyond 48 degrees Celsius is found to have an adverse effect on the metabolic rate of this enzymatic activity, which retards rapidly. In plants, the absorption rate is retarded at low temperature. Photosynthesis operates over a wide range of temperature. Most algae require lower temperature range for photosynthesis than the higher plants. The rate of respiration in plants, however, increases with the rise of temperature, but beyond the optimum limit high temperature decreases the respiration rate. The rate of respiration become doubled, like in animals, at the increase of 10 degrees Celsius above the optimum temperature, provided other factors are favorable, Van 't Hoff's law. However, optimum temperature for photosynthesis is lower than that for respiration, Smith, 1974. 3. Temperature and reproduction. The maturation of gonads, gametogenesis and liberation of gametes takes place at a specific temperature which varies from species to species. For example, some species breed uniformly throughout the year, some only in summer or in winter, while some species have two breeding periods, one in spring and other in fall. Thus, temperature determines the breeding seasons of most organisms. Temperature also affects fecundity of animals. Fecundity of an animal is defined as its reproductive capacity, i.e., the total number of young ones given birth during the lifetime of the animal. For example, females of the insect, Acridid Crotogonus trachyteris became sexually mature at 30 degrees Celsius and 35 degrees Celsius, then at 25 degrees Celsius, and the highest number of eggs per female was laid at temperature of 30 degrees Celsius. The number of eggs decreased from 243 to 190 when the temperature was raised to 30 to 35 degrees C. Grewal and Atwal, 1968. Likewise, in grasshopper species, Melanoplus sanguineps and Camnula pellucida when reared at 32 degrees Celsius produce 20 to 30 times as many eggs than those reared at 22 degrees Celsius. See Ananthakrishnan and Viswanathan, 1976. On the other hand, the fecundity of certain insects such as cotton stem weevil Pemphirulis affini was found to decline with an increase in temperature beyond 32.8 degrees Celsius. Iyer and Margabandhu, 1941. 4. Temperature and sex ratio. In certain animals, the environmental temperature determines the sex ratio of the species. For example, the sex ratio of the copod Macrocyclops albidou is found to be temperature dependent. As the temperature rises, there is a significant increase in number of males. Similarly, in plague flea, Xenopsila Cheapus, males outnumbered females on rats, on days when I the mean temperature remains in between 21 to 25 degrees C. But the position becomes reverse on more cooler days. 5. Temperature and ontogenetic development. Temperature influences the speed and success of development of poikilothermic animals. In general, complete development of eggs and larvae is more rapid in warm temperatures. Trout eggs, for example, develop 4 times faster at 15 degrees Celsius than at 5 degrees Celsius. The insect, Chironomid fly Metriocnemus herticalis, requires 26 days at 20 degrees Celsius for the development of a full generation, 94 days at 10 degrees Celsius, 153 days at 6.5 degrees Celsius, and 243 days at 2 degrees Celsius. Andrew Eartha and Birch, 1954. However, the seeds of many plants will not germinate and the eggs and pupae of some insects will not hatch or develop normally until chilled. Brook trout grows best at 13 degrees Celsius to 16 degrees Celsius, but the eggs develop best at 8 degrees Celsius. 6. Temperature and growth. The growth rate of different animals and plants is also influenced by temperature. For example, the adult trouts do not feed much and do not grow until the water is warmer than 10 degrees Celsius. Likewise, in the oyster Ostrea virginica, the length of the body increase from 1.4 millimeters to 10.3 millimeters when temperature is increased from 10 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius. Sea urchin Echinus esculentus shows maximum size. Xenopsilla chepus. IO in warmer waters. Corals flourish well in those waters which contain water below 21 degrees Celsius. J7. Temperature and coloration. The size, OL and coloration of animals are subject to influence by each temperature. In warm humid climates many animals, such as insects, birds and mammals bear darker. The ermine, also called the stoat, grows a white pigmentation than the races of some species found in coat in winter. In its summer coat it would show and dry climates. This phenomenon is known as against the snow. Glauger rule. In the frog hyla and the horned toad Phrynosoma, low temperatures have been known to induce darkening. Some prawn crustacean invertebrates turn light-colored with increasing temperature. The walking stick Carassius has been known to become black at 15 degrees Celsius and brown at 25 degrees Celsius. 8. Temperature and morphology. Temperature also affects the absolute size of an animal and the relative properties of various body parts. Bergman's rule. Birds and mammals, for example, attain a greater body size when they are in cold regions than in warm regions, and colder regions harbor larger species. But poikilotherms tend to be smaller in colder regions. Body size has played a significant role in adaptation to low temperature because it has influenced the rate of heat loss. According to Brown and Lee, 1969, larger wood rats have a selective advantage in cold climates, apparently because their surface-to-air ratio and greater insulation permit them to conserve metabolic heat. For opposite reasons, small-sized animals are favored in deserts. Further, the extremities of organisms such as tail, ears and legs of mammals often appear to be shorter in colder climate. Allen's rule. Mice reared at 31 degrees to 33.5 degrees Celsius have longer tails than those of the same strain reared at 15.5 degrees to 20 degrees Celsius. Moreover, the races of birds with relatively narrow and more acuminate, i.e., tapered to a slender point, wings tend to occur in colder regions, while those in warmer climates tend to be broader. Wrench's rule. Temperature also influences the morphology of certain fishes and is found to have some relation with the number of vertebrae. Jordan's rule. Cod which hatches off Newfoundland at a temperature between 4 degrees and 8 degrees Celsius has 58 vertebrae, while that hatches east of Nantucket at a temperature between 10 degrees and 11 degrees Celsius has 54 vertebrae. 9. Temperature and cyclomorphosis. The relation between seasonal changes of temperature and body form is manifested in a remarkable phenomenon termed cyclomorphosis exhibited by certain cladocerans such as Daphnia during the warm months of summer. These crustaceans show a striking variation in the size of their helmet or head projection between the winter and summer month. Coker, 1931. The helmet develops on the Daphnia head in spring, it attains its maximum size in summer and disappears altogether in winter to provide usual round shape to the head. Such a kind of cyclomorphosis in the terms of size of the helmet is clearly showing a correlation to the degree of warmth of different seasons. These prolongations of the helmet have been interpreted as an adaptation aiding flotation since the buoyancy of water becomes reduced as the temperature increases, the buoyancy hypothesis. According to other interpretation, viz. Stability hypothesis, the helmet acts like the rudder and gives greater stability to the animal. Besides temperature, such structural Daphnia polymorphism can be caused by other environmental factors including the food. 10. Temperature and animal behavior. Temperature generally influences the behavioral pattern of animals. In temperate waters, the influence of temperature on the behavior of wood borers is profound. For example, in the winter months in general, both Martesia and Teredo occur in smaller numbers in comparison with Benkia campanulata, whose intensity of attack is maximum during the winter months. Further, the advantage gained by certain cold-blooded animals through their motaxis or orientation towards a source of heat are quite interesting. Ticks locate their warm-blooded hosts by a turning reaction to the heat of their bodies. Certain snakes such as rattlesnake, copperheads, pit vipers are able to detect mammals and birds by their body heat which remains slightly warmer than the surroundings. Even in the dark, these snakes strike on their prey with an unnerving accuracy, due to heat radiation coming from the prey. The arrival of cold weather in temperate zones causes the snakes to coil up and huddle together. 11. Temperature and animal distribution. Because the optimum temperature for completion of the several stages of the life cycle of many organisms varies, temperature imposes a restriction on the distribution of species. Generally, the range of many species is limited by the lowest critical temperature in the most vulnerable stage of its life. Generally, the range of many species is limited by the lowest critical temperature in the most vulnerable stage of its life cycle, usually, the reproductive stage. Although the Atlantic lobster will live in water with a temperature range of 0 degrees to 17 degrees Celsius, it will breed only in water warmer than 11 degrees Celsius. The lobster may live and grow in colder water, but a breeding population never becomes established there. Not only temperature effects on breeding in the geographical distribution but also temperature effects on survivability, i.e., lethal effect of temperature feeding, and other biological activities which are responsible in geographic distribution of animals. As noted earlier in this chapter, the animals from colder geographic regions are generally less heat tolerant and more cold tolerant than those animals from warmer regions. For example, members of Aurelia, a jellyfish from Nova Scotia, die at a water temperature of 29 degrees minus 30 degrees Celsius, while Aurelia from Florida can tolerate temperatures up to 38.5 degrees Celsius. Thus, lethal limit of temperature may regulate the range of distribution of Aurelia. Terrestrial invertebrates, particularly arthropods, generally are distributed in all thermal environments where life is found. Many arthropods that have invaded the colder areas have one stage in their life cycle which is very resistant to cold, enabling them to overwinter until warmer weather returns. Salt, 1964. Birds and mammals are also adapted to live in nearly all thermal environments. The distribution of amphibians and reptiles, however, is limited to the relatively warmer thermal climates. Hawk 1964 has listed 3 factors that limit the invasion of reptiles into cold environments. The daily ambient equals atmospheric temperature must be high enough and long enough to allow breeding and to allow adults and youngs to acquire food for overwintering, and there must be adequate sites for hibernation. 12. Temperature and moisture. The differential heating of the atmosphere resulting from temperature variation over the Earth's surface produces a number of ecological effects, including local and trade winds and hurricanes and other storms, but more importantly it determines the distribution of precipitation. Thermal adaptations of plants and animals. Most animals and plants of different ecological habitats have developed various sorts of thermal adaptations during the course of evolution to overcome the harmful effects of extremes of temperature. Some of the significant thermal adaptations of plants and animals are the following. 1. Formation of heat-resistant spores, cysts, seeds, etc. Some of the animals and plants produce heat-resistant cysts, eggs, pupae, spores and seeds which can tolerate extremes of temperatures. Amoebae in cysted conditions can tolerate temperature below 0 degrees Celsius. Similarly, rye seeds remain active even at 0 degrees Celsius and can germinate at that temperature. As an adaptation against frost, the starch of plants changes to fats or oils in the autumn. The fatty oils diminish the freezing points and, thus, increase the power of resistance in plants against frost. Many leaves that grow in the coldest lands store fats. Pentosan's mucilage and pectic substances which have high moisture retaining power are abundant in many plants. They decrease the danger of plants from desiccation during extremes of heat and save them from death. 2. Removal of water from tissue. Dried seeds, spores and cysts avoid freezing because there remains no liquid in them that can freeze. Due to removal of North African jerboa, or desert rat, lives underground by day 2. Water from seeds, the cold resistance of protect themselves from the burning rays of sun. They come out. Seeds of certain plants increases up to D. Lieutenant T. 15 at UL. Seeds of certain plants increases up to D. Lieutenant T. 15 at UL. 3. Dormancy. Dormancy includes 2 already discussed phenomena, namely hibernation and estivation. During both kinds of dormancies, metabolic rate becomes reduced, body temperature becomes low and heartbeat rate is also reduced. 4. Thermal migration. Thermal migrations occur only in animals. The journeys taken by animals that enable them to escape from extremely hot or cold situations are referred to as thermal migrations. For example, desert animals move to shaded places to avoid burning heat of noon, and some animals such as desert reptiles and snakes become nocturnal to avoid heat of the day. The frogs, toads, other amphibians, turtles, etc., make short trips into or out of water, or moist places, and this provides desired cooling and warming to the animal. 3. Precipitation, rain FAILL. The moisture falling on an area in liquid, vapors or frozen form is termed as precipitation. Thus, precipitation includes all moisture that comes to Earth in the form of rain, snow, hail and dew. Precipitation is the chief source of soil water. The water available to plants and animals from soil comes as a result of rainfall. Due to water cycle or hydrological cycle, there occurs an interchange of water between the Earth's surface and the atmosphere. In this cycle, following 2 important events are involved: precipitation and evapotranspiration. The ecofactor of precipitation depends upon season, wind, air pressure, and temperature. Precipitation occurs as a result of the cooling and condensation of water vapor at high altitudes. The low evapotranspiration temperature at high altitudes cools the air, which gets saturated and loses its water holding capacity. As the temperature starts falling, the water vapor condenses and falls as rain due to gravity. Depending on the environmental conditions, precipitation falls as hail, snow or rain. In winter the ground temperature falls, and as a result, atmospheric vapor gets condensed as dew or frost on the surfaces of objects, plants, animals, soils, etc. Dew becomes an important source of moisture too. Plants in the winter season. Drizzle involves minute drops, appearing as to float in air. Rain is stay drops of liquid water, which are larger than drizzle and also heavier. Snow is the moisture is solid state. Sleet is the form of small grains or pellets of ice, whereas hail consists of balls or lumps of ice. Light drizzle is of little importance as very little dew. Moisture penetrates the soil because much of it evaporates rapidly. Snow is injurious to plants, breaking tender branches, flowers and fruits. Hail and sleet also cause similar damage. Some sedges grow in snow patches. Of all the above forms of precipitation, the rain is most important. It is the source of soil water and also affects humidity of atmosphere. The total precipitation of the world is about 4.46 x 10% degree G per year, and of this amount 0.99 x 10 G fell on land and the rest on oceans. Hutchinson, 1957. In India, rains are caused by monsoons. Monsoon is a special pattern of moist air movement prevalent in India. During monsoon, the air masses moving from the Arabian Sea to the west coasts of India and from the Bay of Bengal to the eastern part of country become extremely moist. About 45% of the water available during annual precipitation flows into river, 20% percolates in the ground, and the remaining 35% is lost by evaporation. Gentle steady rains are most effective because much of it penetrates the soil. Torrential rains on the land are most disastrous because they lead to flooding, soil erosion, destruction of vegetation and of animals. The quantity, duration and intensity of rainfall profoundly regulate the vegetation of any place. For example, in tropical areas with heavy rainfall throughout the year, vegetation mainly include evergreen forests. In countries with heavy rainfall during winter and low during summer, there are present sclerophyllous forests. The plants are shrubs, stunted in height, with leathery, thick, evergreen leaves. The areas with heavy rainfall during summer and low during winter are characterized by the presence of grasslands. The regions where rainfall is scanty are seen with deserts and xerophytic vegetation. The average annual rainfall of India about 117 centimeters, the highest in the world. However, there exists great variations between the different regions in India with regard to rainfall. Thus, the average annual rainfall in Assam and the northeast is about 250 centimeters. In Cherrapunji, in Meghalaya, the annual average of rainfall is about 1,100 cm, whereas in Jaisalmer in Rajasthan it is only 20 centimeters. The distribution of rainfall over India depends largely on the position of hills and mountains and the forest cover. Thus, monsoon winds strike the western Ghats from a southwest direction and shed most of their water on the windward side. Bombay, being on the windward side, receives 200 centimeters of rainfall annually during the monsoon, while Pune, being on the leeward side, i.e., side of anything away from wind, receives only about 75 centimeters. If the rainfall to evaporation ratio is 0 or less, deserts develop. Grasslands develop when this ratio is more than 0.2 and less than 1, and forests develop when the ratio is more than 1, around 1.6 to 2. Often in forests, the floor receives rain from trees in the form of drips from tree leaves due to accumulation of condensed water on winter mornings. An evergreen forest. 4. Humidity of air. Atmospheric moisture in the form of invisible vapor is known as humidity. The humidity of air is expressed in terms of values of relative humidity, which is the amount of moisture in iris percentage of the amount which the air can hold at saturation at the existing temperature. Relative humidity is measured by the instrument called psychrometer or by paper strip hygrometer or a thermohydrograph. Humidity is greatly affected by intensity of solar radiation, temperature, altitude, wind exposure, cover and water status of soil. High temperature increases the capacity of the air to retain moisture and results in lower relative humidity. Low temperatures result in higher relative humidity by decreasing the capacity of air for moisture and reaches 100% or saturation point. Further cooling results in condensation of vapor into water, and this temperature, moisture point, is called the dew point. Daily variations in relative humidity values depend upon the type of habitat conditions. In plains and deserts, it may show variations during day, whereas in oceanic islands there is little variation, being same throughout the year. Humidity plays an important role in the life of plants and animals. It affects the life processes such as transpiration, absorption of water, etc. The rate of evapotranspiration is modified by the factors as saturation deficit, i.e., degree of wetness or dryness, temperature and wind velocity. Parasitic fungi becomes abundant in moist weather and reduces primary production. See Ambushed, 1990. Some plants such as orchids, lichens, mosses, etc., make direct use of atmospheric moisture. In fungi and other microbes, humidity plays an important role in germination of spores and subsequent stages in life cycle. 5. Fire. Fire is an interesting ecofactor. Fire is of a common occurrence in natural vegetation all over the world. It is more common in drier habitats than the wet. Lightning is the commonest natural cause of fire initiation. Our Earth's surface is hit by lightning every second in one or another part of the globe, and many of these are of great magnitude. Other causes of fire are abrasive effects of falling rocks or of dried plant material such as bamboos, or spontaneous combination of very dry and hot material, or by volcanic activities. Most forest fires are now man-caused, i.e., by incendiarists, such as poachers, debris burners, smokers, campers, short-circuiting of high-tension electric lines, and nearby railway lines. In the Meghalaya region, tribals and even modern farmers practice the jhum cultivation by periodically slashing the forest, burning them and raising crops on the ash-enriched soil for a few years and moving to another segment of forest as the earlier one becomes eroded and nutrient deficient. Slash and burning subsistence farming in a small 1 equals patch of cleared tropical rain forest in Costa Rica. Litter heap also get dried. Surface fire in Ocala National Forest in Florida. Oka and fire. Lonal fires like this burn deadwood, undergrowth, and continues litter and help prevent more destructive crown fires in some types of forests. For a longer period, ground fires are flameless and subterranean and kill almost all herbaceous plants rooted in the burning material except some woody species, shrubs and trees. Surface fires which sweep over the ground surface rapidly and their flames consume the litter, living herbaceous vegetation and shrubs, and also scorching the tree bases if comes in contact. Eat crown fires, which are most destructive, burning the forest canopy and are common in dense woody vegetations. They spread in the top layers from the canopy of one tree to the canopy of another and so on. Canopy fires produce a temperature up to 704.5 degrees Celsius, killing the trees, shrubs and herbs. However, in moist soil surface, the underground plant parts and buried seeds escape death. Types of fire. Fires are generally classified as ground fires which develop in sick conditions where organic matter, litter, accumulates richly as heaps and they catch fire which generally smolder for longer periods. Thus, in dry litter, fire is rapid and extinguishes quickly, while in somewhat moist litter, the fire is slow and with its heat the inner parts of. Destructive crown fire in Yellowstone National Park during the summer of 1988. Wildlife that can't escape are killed and wildlife habitats are destroyed. Severe erosion can occur. Effects of fire. Fire has direct, e.g., lethal, as well as indirect effects on plants and wildlife. Some well-confirmed indirect effects of fire on plants are as follows. 1. Fire causes injury to some plants, resulting large scars on their stems. Such scars may serve as suitable avenues of entry of parasitic fungi and insects. 2. Fire arrests the course of succession and modify the edaphic environment very much. 3. Fire brings about distinct changes of such ecofactors as light, rainfall, nutrient cycles, fertility of soil, litter and humus contents of soil, pH, water holding capacity and soil fauna, earthworms, nematodes, arthropods, etc. Soil fungi are reduced while bacteria increase due to post-fire changes in the soil. The microclimate too is greatly changed due to addition of ash, loss of shade, loss of raindrop interception, accelerated erosion, etc. 4. Fire plays an important role in the removal of competition for surviving species. Fire-tolerant plant species generally increase in abundance at the expense of those killed by fire, fire-sensitive plants, due to considerable reduction in competition and possibly due to alteration in other conditions. 5. Some plants such as Populus tremuloides and Epilobium angustifolium are stimulated to growth by fires. A number of such grasses as Aristida stricta, Cynodon dactylon, Paspalum notatum, are stimulated by fire to produce large quantities of seeds. In some grasses and legumes, the seeds would germinate only after these get fire treatment, e.g., seeds of Themeta, Heteropogon, Andropogon, Rheus, Tephrosia and Stipa. 6. Some fungi, mainly some ascomycetes, grow in soils of burnt areas. Such fungi are known as pyrophilus, e.g., Pyrophilus confluens. Epilobium angustifolium. Adaptations to fire. In frequent fire-prone areas certain plants develop the following adaptations. 1. Certain trees, particularly conifers such as pinus and larix and dicots such as quercus develop fire-resistant bark with insulating effect against heat. These trees also have tall trunk with the crown restricted to upper zone only. This helps in escaping the destructions against surface and ground fires. 2. In some plants leaves are fire-resistant due to poor contents of such compounds such as resin or oil, and may quercus check surface fires. 3. Some plants as Pinus rigida and species of eucalyptus have adventitious or latent axillary buds which may develop into new branches. Similarly Betula papyrifera and Vaccinium sp. may develop new shoots after fire kills the older ones. 4. Epilobium angustifolium acts as a fire indicator species. It grows in patches and in dormant condition. In case of fire, these plants rapidly grow while other plants die due to fire.